All right, so it's hard to give kind of a brief update on everything that's been happening with SICIM. So I'm going to try to do that and keep it concise. Don's going to go over a little bit more of some of the details of actually some of the cool project accomplishments. And I'll try to do my best to keep it brief of just about SICIM and some of the things we've been doing over the past year. Okay. So what's kind of cool is since we've been doing this meeting virtually, we've had a huge increase in the attendance of our annual meeting. So I always like to start with just a brief who is SICIM and a brief about for everyone that may be new to our annual meeting and haven't heard about us before. And really, we keep on changing. So there's always almost something new happening each year to update people on. So about the state of Indiana Cooperative Invasive Management, or SICIM, you guys might have known we just recently switched our name, but we are a regional nonprofit organization, historically based in Southern Indiana, though we've been moving that, and I'll get to that here in a little bit. Formed to address the threat of invasive plants and other species. We were formed in 2008, so we've been around for a little bit, and we were doing some kind of smaller localized projects, and we really kind of caught our groove a little bit before 2017 with trying to work with local groups and facilitate local work, invasive species awareness and work on the ground. And with that, we entered with the Natural Resources Conservation Service into a contribution agreement in 2017 that really has just, I mean, gone very well and really expanded the scope and the reach that our organization has been able to get to. So we used to be Southern Indiana. With the agreement, we really expanded our organization to the entire state. And recently, just at the end of last year, we finally switched our name from Southern Indiana Cooperative Invasives Management to State of Indiana Cooperative Invasives Management to kind of be able to really stem or avoid some of the confusion we're getting with some of the projects we're trying to do in Northern Indiana when people are like, well, you're from Southern Indiana. Why are you working in Northern Indiana? Why do you care about Northern Indiana? And of course, we care for the whole state. We just had a lot of people actively involved in Southern Indiana, but we are shifting to being a statewide organization too. Okay, with that, so some of you may be wondering, well, who exactly is involved with this organization? So this is a list of our 2021 board members, our officers. Myself, I'm the chair, Will Drews, work for the Knox County Soil and Water Conservation District. We have several folks from Knox County that are passionate about this this cause. As our vice chair, Troy Hinkle, also is with Knox County. Then our treasurer, Jason Larson, with DNR Nature Preserves, Secretary Tina Ligman, retired Forest Service, Ray Chatton, also a Knox County resident from State Soil Conservation Board, Cheryl Kuhn, botanist with the Forest Service, Janet Egger, District Forester, IDNR Forestry, Allison Schoaf, NRCS, Anthony Sipes, IDNR State Park, and Phil Wooldery, Purdue Extension, Pulaski County. And so we're drawing folks from all around, and we're happy to have Phil join recently and give us kind of that Northern Indiana perspective too. And recently we did have one switch. Jason Larson termed out at the end of last year, and we've recruited Jake Brinkman with Indianapolis Parks. Yes, I hope that's right, Jake. To join our board, and he's already gung ho and get involved. So, and we're glad to have him. Besides our board, we do have several standing committees to actually do work. In our 2021 standing committees, where we have our communications committee with Steve Cotter with Bloomington Parks and Rec being the chair, and he's also a past chair of our organization. Troy Hinkle, chair of our finance committee. Our legislative committee, which is doing really getting active now. Ray Chatton's a chair, and we will have some exciting news here soon to share regarding that. That I think we'll kind of tease in our next newsletter. And then our O&D committee, organizational development, Cheryl Kuhn is our chair of that. And we're always looking, if in case you're wondering, well, I kind of want to get involved with broad overarching picture help with this issue. Feel free to reach out to me, Stephanie or Dawn, and we'll get you plugged into a committee if you'd like to get more involved. Okay, and the big thing that I'm sure everyone knows and is here and probably heard about and been involved in, but our NRCS contribution agreement we've been referring to as the Indiana Invasives Initiative, or III. Mostly, and that's because really we've taken this concept having local CISMAs, local leadership efforts on the ground, and developing these groups and moved it statewide, as well as providing a framework for assistance with our regional specialists and other staff in order to help facilitate those groups and provide technical assistance to the ground. And man, we started off kind of dipping our toes in the water, figuring things out as a Southern Indiana group, managing things statewide, and really we've been moving full throttle, and now we're up to 5 regional specialists, an executive director, Stephanie, who you met earlier, and a program coordinator, Dawn, and Slack, who everyone knows as well. And we'll be giving a very inspiring report here in a little bit too. But we just finished our 4th year of this 5-year agreement. We are on our last year right now, and I will let everyone know that we are in the works of creating a new, well, extending our current agreement in a new iteration starting at the end of the year. So we're going to have some exciting news to share about that here coming out in a little bit. I feel like I'm just, it's kind of like, oh, and there's going to be this other exciting thing that's coming out that you can pay attention to here. But yeah. Okay, so let me just introduce some of our staff. So we have, as I mentioned, our new executive director as of the end of last year, and we're happy to have her, Stephanie Shook. And you'll see Stephanie, and if you have questions, Zoom questions or meeting questions, feel free to comment to Stephanie. And our other staff. And then our II program coordinator, Dawn Slack, who I'm sure everyone knows. And recently we do have exciting news to share that Dawn is with us full time. So we're excited for that too. All right, and our regional specialists. So for Northwest, we have Mandy Glans, Northeast, Dugan Julian, West Central, Amber Slaughterbeck, South Central, Kayla Knees, and East Central, Liz Yetter. And last year, we also did have Mary Wells, who unfortunately did leave us, but we are glad to have her as a partner now as the education director for Sycamore Land Trust. So we wish Mary all the best, and she's still been helping us out on some things, and we're glad to have that relationship. Okay, I sent it out in the announcement with our Zoom links, but all of our regional specialists this year, instead of giving reports during this meeting, have created these great videos that you can check out about all the things happening in their counties with their CISMAs. And besides the link that I sent there, that is not friendly to just easily jot down and type in your browser. You can just go on YouTube and search SICIM. I just checked. I don't know if my algorithm's biased, but SICIM is the first thing to pop up, our channel. And you can find our regional specialists. There's a playlist for all of their reports. So please check those out and see all the great work that they've been doing. And here's a map just showing our current staff and the counties that they work in. This has changed a bit, and it is ever changing. It almost seems like, so we try to keep this updated on our website, and you can find that on the III tab at SICIM.info. But here's kind of our coverage with our staff throughout the state. Okay, so some of the highlights that I just want to mention from last year is we started with, for the first time, doing a competitive grants program for local CISMAs. So we want to make sure that these groups that we're helping form had the resources, besides the technical resources, also the financial resources to accomplish the objectives and goals that they want to do. And so we were pleased to be able to offer a funding program for them last year, competitive grants program, that went really well. And most of the grants will be, those grants will be finishing up at the end of May, if they aren't already done. And we have already, because it was so successful, advertised another round, which we will be announcing the 2022 recipients at the end of this meeting as well. So in case you're like, I don't know if I want to stay for the whole meeting, you definitely want to stick around for that announcement. One of the big things is with 2021, we were able to, well, we've really never stopped working, but we were able to get out and do a lot more events and especially work days. A lot of work was done on the ground last year in the form of weed wrangles and other work days. And here's a great shot from CHIRP, the Clark County CISMA group. Doing some work at Charleston State Park, and we're really happy about all of the, or really proud to be able to say that we've been able to get a lot of work facilitated and done on lots of really cool properties across the state. And Dawn will kind of discuss a little bit more about that with her report. One of the great things about 2021 eventually was we got to do some more in-person programming, and that's kind of I mean, we all love Zoom, as we're on a Zoom call right now. It's convenient for some things, but there are a lot of things that really being able to be in person and to correspond with someone or a lot of people at an event is really beneficial. And we're glad to be at the Earth Day Indiana event. You can see Amber and Liz here with their smiling faces talking about the worst plants that exist in our state, as well as we were also able to attend the Indiana Hardwood Expo in Marion County, and several other events, in-person events, as well as we did also present and attend a lot of virtual events too. A cool partnership that we were able to be a part of is we worked with River to River, CWMA based out of Southern Illinois, and partnered with them to help host a field day for the Japanese Chafflower Summit last year. And Japanese Chafflower is, I'll still say, an early detection species for the most part. More recent invader, especially in southern Indiana along the Ohio River, but it is working its way north, unfortunately. and we've been trying to get the word out about it. And we were really excited to be able to host a field day in Posey County at Hovey Lake. And you can see an image here of some of the attendees from conservation districts, from DNR, and even some concerned landowners, just learning more about Japanese chaff flower, how to identify it, as well as here we were discussing control techniques, such as the manager at Hovey Lake, Zach, he did some herbicide trials, and so we looked at some of the herbicide plots of the best treatments that he had for controlling, and what they're going to start to do more on that property. So it was a cool opportunity, and we're hoping to be able to partner with more of these summits in the future, and maybe hold some of our own. And this was cool also because it was an international event. We even had some folks from Canada presenting, because unfortunately they somehow have Japanese chaff flower up in Canada as well, unfortunately, again. But you can check out Kayla's report that I mentioned before, has some more information about that field day for those that are interested. Okay, really, I would like to thank all of our 2021 sponsors, because the way that our funding works, we kind of are required to match everything. And so really we need a lot of support from organizations and grassroots support in order to make everything work. And so we had a lot of awesome sponsors last year, and we're so grateful for their support and being able to help us out and keep everything running and actually ramping up and keep on moving forward. So here are our sponsors, and we have all this information listed in our annual report, which you can find on our website on the front page at sicim.info. With that, I would be remiss to not mention that we are always accepting donations, and we'll be happy to add your name to that list, or if you want to be anonymous, we're okay with that too. We do have an easy donate tab on our page, as well as we also are happy to accept checks at our mailing address, 1919 Stephen Ave, Bedford, Indiana. Okay, I do want to mention we are doing a final push for our t-shirt campaign, and I will note we are looking to maybe update the design and redo it. So this is kind of a last call for our limited edition old shirts. So you can find that we have a campaign on Bonfire. You can search Indiana Invasives Initiative and it should come up there. But it's our fun Ask Me About Invasive Species with some of the more common invasive species listed on the back. Okay. The fun part. So I'm going to talk about some of our award recipients. We always do each year a Volunteer of the Year award, a Partner of the Year award, as well as a President's Choice award. And we'll start off with the Volunteer of the Year award. The interesting thing about this recipient is we're talking with a couple of the other board members, we're confused that she hasn't been recognized sooner, because she is a very active, passionate volunteer that really even started our group and has been really engaged and involved, especially through these years, these past couple of years, as we kind of morph into this larger organization and take on more of these responsibilities. And she's really active on our board, officer, as well as our communications committee, and always kind of takes that extra step in order to help get things done. So I would like to officially recognize our 2021 Volunteer of the Year as Tina Ligman, our very own Tina Ligman. Congrats, wow. Tina. We're glad to have you. I'm hoping it's a surprise. Cheryl and I tried to keep it a surprise from you, but
it is. Thank you.
Good. So thank you, Tina, for all you do, and we're glad to have you.
Wow.
Okay. Next, we'll move on to our partner of the year, and this one's actually pretty tough. We're very fortunate to have a lot of support from a lot of great partners, and which is great. And it can sometimes be tough to choose one in particular. But for this past year, we really want to recognize, because they've been giving us consistent funding and support, being at our events, supporting the III, the initiative, and attending like the CISMA conference. And so for last year, we want to recognize our partner of the year as the Indiana Society of American Foresters, or SAF. And so thank you, SAF, for being sponsoring us and being a great partner and helping out with the initiative and spreading the word about invasive plants. And finally, we have a President's Choice Award, and for this past year, could be they've really been an awesome, I mean, they've been a partner, supporter of the initiative, and really helped us get everything going from the get-go, providing us a source of funding to utilize and leverage. And so we, again, it's hard to recognize everyone, but we do want to recognize them and their support, and potentially future support, and that is the Indiana State Soil Conservation Board. And they are the ones that determine Clean Water Indiana funding, and they've been crucial for us to be able to carry out our the contribution agreement. So thank you, State Soil Conservation Board members, for all that you do and for supporting our organization. Okay, and in case everyone was wondering what these folks are getting as awards, we have a nice, I like to call it unsustainably cut calorie pear, hoping for eradication, cookies with our SICIM and an award plaque. So every award recipient, you'll be receiving one of those here in the mail, or I think for your case, Tina, probably in person here soon. So I guess a virtual round of applause for all of them, for all that they do. Okay, so now we'll move on to our. We only have a couple business items that we'll take care of today. So so bear with us, everyone. The first thing is we will go over just our 2021 financial report, and you can also find this on our annual report, this information, and that's on our website. But in 2021, our total income was $441,000 and change. Most of that occurring from our contribution agreement with NRCS, and then we do have you can see the breakdown of some of our other income sources. And then expenses, you can see there on the other hand, $378,000 and change, and most of that goes for paying our employee salaries, as well as you can see the chunk for other operations in our grants program. So that is our financial report from our board members. I guess I would entertain a motion to accept the financial report as presented.
This is Janet. I'll make a motion to accept the financial report.
Thank you, Janet.
Great chat, and we'll second.
Thank you, Ray, for the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Great, motion passes. Thanks, everyone. And lastly, we are going to elect our new officers for 2022. Here's our current slate that we have. I want to run for president or chair again. We have Troy Hinkle re-upping for vice president, and Tina Ligman re-upping for secretary. We are, with Jason leaving, we're in a little bit of limbo with treasurer, but we're getting that solved, worked out here, and we'll have that operational here in a little bit. But those are our current slate of officers, and I'll entertain any nominations from the floor, or to a motion to accept the slate of officers and proceed there.
This is Cheryl. I make the motion to accept the list.
Thank you, Cheryl. Do we have a second?
This is Janet. I second.
All right, Janet seconds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, those are our 2022 officers. Thank you all. I guess I'll thank myself. And we're excited to keep things going here for this next iteration. And I think I'm ahead of schedule, but I think that's okay. That concludes my section of the report. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. All right. Dawn, do you want to take it away?
I sure can. Let's see if I can successfully do this. Is my screen being shared?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, great. Well, thanks everyone, like Will said, for joining us today. Much appreciated, and good morning to all of you. I'm going to keep my video off because it taxes my internet. So there's a lot of you with us today. I wanted to kind of start before I jump into some updates and stats for the Indiana Invasives Initiative, but also just to kind of give you a little inspirational kick here with this beautiful picture. Indiana offers so much for us to celebrate and protect. And a lot of times, if you're working in invasive species, you get mired and bogged down in the day-to-day barrage of, why are we doing this? This is useless. It's not worth this, but it is. And just this morning, I got an email from someone who is on with our meeting today, and he received an email from someone who said, you know, I realize that those calorie pairs are invasive. However, they were so well maintained. Wouldn't it have been okay just to have left them there? And I can't see your faces right now, but I hope you're reacting as I did, and I know as he did. And it was just like, oh, they don't fully understand that term and the definition of invasive. They have to go. We have to get them out of the way. They cause harm. And just this beautiful scene here in Indiana at Box Canyon in Perry County, which is home to some very rare species, such as French's shooting star, amongst others, is such an inspiration for us. So I encourage encourage you to get out. If you have not seen some of the amazing things in Indiana, take your best buddy, your relative, your neighbor, your partner in crime, and go check out and be inspired, because we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but it's worth it. So check out some of those areas in Indiana. Let's see if I can get my screen to advance. And there we go. Oh, and now it went too far. So, as Will said, we have 5 regional specialists now for the Indiana Invasives Initiative Project. And I call that the III a lot of times. We have 34 CISMAs operating in the state, and we're working with about 71 counties. That is phenomenal. And I don't want to just say that the other counties are not also working on the impacts of invasive species, because many of them are, but we are definitely in contact with those 71, and we're looking to reach out to all of them, anybody that wants to work with us. So we've come a long way, and I'm going to show you on the next slide kind of how far we've come over the last 4 years. We have completed over 200 weed wrangles in this state over the last, about 4 years. That is phenomenal. And weed wrangles are an amazing platform to get out there and really show people how to do it, you know, get them engaged and take responsibility for those green spaces. They're just wonderful. And there isn't another state in the United States that's doing it the way that we are. We're moving things here. We're making things happen. So kudos to all of that. We've completed over 800 landowner visits and technical assist, and that includes about 27,000. It's actually over that, but about 27,000 acres. If you add that to all of the other work that's going on in the state, all the other conservation work through our Natural Resource Conservation Service, through the DNR, and other programs, through Land Trust, we're starting to see the connectivity, and that's exactly what this project was about. So again, lots of great work going on. We've completed over 800 outreach events. That's over 80,000 people have heard us. Some of those have heard us multiple times, but that's okay. We're always happy to spread the message again each time you learn something a little different. I know I do, and there's so much to learn. We are, as Will said, working on our next 5-year agreement with NRCS, and that is super exciting and gives us a chance, hopefully, to build a more sustainable program. And we're partnering with so many to provide training across the state, and it just keeps growing by leaps and bounds. The best news out of all of this, though, is that our CISMAs, that boots on the ground, those grassroots movement, that local connectivity is happening, and they are doing some great things. They're conducting, a lot of them have had the training, and they're conducting their own landowner surveys and providing that technical assistance with us. They're developing invasive species management teams. Also, you may have heard me call them strike teams. And this is super exciting because this is where our CISMAs are really hitting the ground and making that connectivity between those green spaces, such as the photograph that I showed you at the beginning, that Box Canyon in Perry County. These strike teams are out there partnering directly with those land managers of those green spaces, and they are jumping in and building building the capacity to manage those as they need to be managed so that we save those. And that's where our biodiversity resides. And then we start connecting along those other corridors like streams or any of a myriad of other corridors that we have. Even highways can be connecting corridors for wildlife and native species. So the rubber is hitting the road, and it's a lot to be excited. We're conversing about the impacts of invasive species in a myriad of ways. There are billboards, there are native shrub swaps, there are training events happening at our local Department of Transportation in our county areas, or just at our schools and our colleges. Things are just happening across this state, and it's the CISMAs that are leading the way. Man, that's great news. And lastly, the SISMAs are out there on the ground managing invasive species. I did have the word killing on there, and that's kind of probably my go-to for this, but managing is probably more tasteful, so I'll leave it with managing invasive species. So let's compare. In 2019, when I presented, the map on the left was kind of where we were. We had jumped in there. Some of our counties were immediately raising their hand, and we were still working with some of the existing SISMAs in the state. On the right, this is as of yesterday. This is an ever-changing map. You know, it's fluid, things come and go, but look where we are in just a couple of years. And this is not because we're out there necessarily beating the street and going, you will join and you will create a SISMA in your county. This is just the excitement, the inspiration that's coming from our grassroots, from our people here in this state going, you know what, I know this is important and I want to be a part of it. I want to help find solutions. And that is a beautiful map. That is lovely to see, because that means that Indianans are taking the responsibility. We're owning it, and we're going to fix the issue. It's just wonderful to see, and there's more coming. And just because you're white doesn't mean that, or you don't have a specific color doesn't mean you're also not also raising your hand. It may be just we haven't had a chance to get to you yet. So 34 total SISMAs. And just to show you, we are connecting habitat across the state. Those SISMAs are busy. They're making the boots on the ground, the work that we need happen. So these maps, the background base map that you're seeing with the green and the purple, those are resilient protected lands. That's what the kind of a catch-all for those habitats. It's really topography and where we have some intact native habitat still in place. In the purple, those are the protected lands in Indiana, those set aside. And if you start to look at the dots, you'll see orange, blue, and red. Let's look at the orange on the left-hand side. Those are weed wrangles, and that's not all of them. It's what I could get in the database. I'm still manipulating that database a bit. But those are the weed wrangles, and you can see that we're spread across the state, and we're focused some on our resilient and protected lands where we need to be, and then we're also right there in those neighborhoods. And it's important that we do both, not only work in those connected lands, but also in our urban and suburban areas, because we know that 85% of the invasive species we find in those protected areas come from our landscaped areas. So we've got to do both. And that's what this program is about. That's what the CISMA work is about. It's doing and tackling both of those to build true connectivity across the state. In the middle, the blue dots are landowner surveys and some technical assistance that we've provided, and it is exploding. And again, that's not just the regional specialists out there, and they're working their tail ends off. And Stephanie and I and SICIM are part of that as well. But that's also the CISMAs raising their hand and saying, train me and let me go help. And that's exactly what we need. And then the map on the right with the red dots, those are our strike teams, or our invasive management teams that are out there, invasive species management teams. There's dots up at the top of the map where we're partnering with some land trust, and we're partnering even with a Christian camp that just happens to have one of our native rice species in Indiana. How cool is that? And so again, that CISMA has raised their hand and said, man, let us go. We want to do this. So they're going to help manage and make sure that we continue to have that native rice in Indiana. And as we move south down through the state there, you come through the middle of the state where great work is happening in some of our rare seep areas, seep and fin areas there in Henry County. Come all the way south, you've got Bartholomew picking up there, Monroe and Brown County taking on some work, and then Harrison County working with our state folks there at the Crawford Harrison State Forest. So as well as with another land trust. So lots of great work happening, lots of connectivity. And finally, recognizing that partnership. Again, recognizing we've got to do this in a collaborative way. This is our kudzu map. Everything in green contains or has populations of kudzu in the state of Indiana. And Ken Cody, who is managing the kudzu populations here, has reached out, and some of our CISMAs, some of them already are working with Ken, such as Marion County CISMA, MC Iris, but he is reaching out to other CISMAs as well to, again, build that collaboration to help. We've got to get this under control. We need our CISMAs to jump in and help us. And that was the whole purpose. So just to give you some more inspiring pictures and a few more stats to tickle your fancy and keep you going. In 2018, we hosted about 17 weed wrangle events. In 2019, we had 19. I actually think we had a few more than that, but there may have, I won't get into the weeds on that. In 2020, despite some obstacles that were against us, we held 40 events. And in 2021, we blew it away with 166 weed wrangle events. I will tell you, I cannot keep up with it. So we've created a little website. Stephanie, thank you to you and Esme for helping get this going, and I'll share with that in a minute. But I wanted to also recognize that in 2022, we've just started. We've already got 60 plus on the calendar, and we're sitting around 20 have actually already been done. It is so important. You see lots of people, smiling faces, getting out there together, building each other, boosting each other up, being inspired by nature, as well as being inspired by the own grit that each of us have to make this happen. If you look on the far right, that pile starts at the one side of that photograph and goes all the way past that car, all the way down. It's a blast to get out here and do these. Thank you all for doing that. It is such, weed wrangles they're a great tool in our toolkit. They're nationwide. So whenever we do them, we are not alone. We are doing them together. And that's that connectivity, collaboration, and creativity that comes from just working with somebody else to come up with a solution. So please, we're doing so many weed wrangles. It is such a blast to do this. We've created a place on the SICIM website where you actually go there and register your weed wrangle through that portal. So please continue to work with your regional specialist. Call me, call Stephanie, work with us, but we're going to have you register your event through this portal. It's easy, no different questions than you have been doing, but it helps manage all of that data that's coming in. And we are required to submit our data to the Weed Wrangle Gurus out of Georgia and Tennessee. So just to kind of wrap this up just a little bit, I really want to give thanks to Stephanie, to Will, to SICIM, to the regional specialist for working so hard. We're out there. Here's our map, as Will showed you earlier, and this does kind of change frequently, but we're trying really hard to make sure that if you want to be involved, that we get you involved. So reach out to us. You can find this information on the SICIM website. You can email any of us. It's our first name at sicim.info. And Stephanie has come on board, and she's really trying to get us in the know. We want you to use that website. So on the website, there's some new information, little tidbits about each one of us. If you look under the news column, she put in there, just a little tiny brief about why each one of us manages invasives. And we challenge you to be inspired by all the work is going on and ask yourself, why do I do this? Because that why is what inspires other people to jump on board and help as well. It's that personal dedication that you have, and that's why grassroots works better than anything else. So more tools, please check out the SICIM website. We've got videos, speaker presentations, native landscaping. We've got links to the Midwest Invasive Plant Network, links to our Indiana Native Plant Society, links to lots and lots of information. It's a one-stop shop, links to Purdue, links to all kinds of stuff right there. We highlight quarterly some CISMA work that's going on, so you never know if you're going to be on there or maybe want another partner work. And if you want to reach out and to any one of us, you can click and go right to us from that website if you forget what our email address is. So check us out. And I'll just wrap this up with kind of letting you know what our Invasive Plant Advisory Committee is doing. And the Invasive Plant Advisory Committee, you'll often hear me call that IPAC. That is a committee of our State Invasive Species Council. I think most of you are aware that we have a terrestrial plant rule now. We created a fact sheet that's available on the SICIM website, as well as on the IndianaInvasiveSpecies.org website. There is a terrestrial plant rule guide. You can download that for free on the website, on the SICIM website as well. We did assess about 22 plants. We ended that assessment in 2019, and we have asked the state DNR to add those that we assessed and ranked high to be added to the terrestrial plant rule. We're still in that process. We haven't gotten very far on that, or DEPP has not gotten very far along on that, but that process is still going on. So we are doing monthly write-ups that are on the SICIM website, so check them out. I think they're also shared as part of the SICIM webpage and the IPAC Facebook page. Check them out, ask questions, and help us spread the word. Lastly, there is EdMaps and how to report along using the EdMaps portal. There's information on the SICIM website about that. And I will admit, I'm very far behind, but we're assessing those reports as quickly as we can. So continue to report those invasive species. And I'm going to leave you with one last thing here. Oops, I'm clicking happy here. There's nothing like a logo to say that you are invested, you're serious about what you're doing. And our CISMAs, if you haven't been involved in this is tough. This is, again, where the rubber meets the road. If you're going to wear something on a hat or a shirt, or you're going to put it out there on the web or the side of your car or whatever, your logo speaks volumes. And our CISMAs are creating they're serious about this, which means they're sustainable and they're in it for the haul, and they're creating some pretty cool logos. Hopefully I'm not missing anyone on here. If I am, reach out, let me know, because I definitely want to keep this slide up to date. So just to leave you with how serious and dedicated we are, check out our logos. Check out what the CISMAs are doing. You can access their information from the SICIM website as well. So thank you all. Note we've got some upcoming events. We do a quarterly CISMA Luncheon Network. The next one is May 19th. We do them at 12:15 Eastern Time. We do this 4 times a year. We have various guest speakers to come in. So join us on that. It's a very short 1-hour meeting. Our upcoming CISMA conference is going to be, it'll start August the 17th this year. It's going to be a multi-day event. We will do field day just like we did last year. More information will follow. You can find that information on the SICIM.info website as well. So thank you everyone again. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. You can email me at any time, and I will leave you with that. I see there's another poll up. All right, well, I'm going to turn it back over to Will and Stephanie. And feel free to ask questions.
I think it's brief break time, right, Stephanie? Would you mind bringing up your slide with the agenda and
Yeah.
Stuff again, Stephanie?
Yeah, sure will. How much time do you want? You want 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Is 5 minutes enough for everybody?
Let's
to
do 5
refresh their
minutes.
coffee?
If that's okay.
Here, and I'm going to be introducing our speakers. We plan to have both speakers answer questions. However, we've got a large number of people, which isn't a bad thing. It's a very good thing. But we're going to ask that if you have questions that you type them into the chat box. And then Stephanie and I are going to try and keep track of those and field those for our speakers at the end. So with that, I'll introduce our first speaker. Elizabeth Barnes is the exotic forest pest educator with the Department of Entomology at Purdue University. She received her bachelor's degree from Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts, where she studied the impact of invasive plants on monarch butterflies. After college, she left New England and headed west, receiving her doctorate in ecology from the University of Denver, where she specialized in plant-insect interactions and studied tent caterpillars and fall webworms. She currently works on science communication and invasive species outreach at Purdue. So we're excited to have her here to talk to us. Take it away, Elizabeth.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. I'm always, not happy to talk about spotted lanternfly, but very willing to talk about spotted lanternfly. I'm going to give you an overview of spotted lanternfly today, touch on some basic biology, the impact it's having and management recommendations, as well as talk a little bit about the Indiana infestation. So I'd like to start out by showing you the current distribution of spotted lanternfly. All of the blue counties on this map have an established population of lanternfly, and the purple dots show places where they found an individual lanternfly. If I had been showing you this last summer, it would not have included Indiana, but unfortunately, midsummer last year, we did get a report of an active population of spotted lanternfly here in Indiana. So now it has officially arrived. One thing that I always like to highlight when I show people this map, these are the purple dots, but I've put flags on them to make them a little easier to see. And as you can see from this map, a lot of the places where the lanternfly is popping up are not areas that are connected to that core initial introduction in Pennsylvania. They are very good hitchhikers. They're pretty good at just, hiding in things. The egg masses are really hard to spot. And so it's very easy to move them around the country, which is one of the biggest problems with this insect. There are a variety of different ways that lanternfly is moved to new areas. It's kind of the usual suspects for invasive insects. They can hitch a ride on vehicles, so that's cars, trucks, any other vehicle. I've seen some pretty impressive images of them actually just like clinging to windshields at high speed. So they are pretty strong for a little insect. They also are transported because there are often host plants of the lanternfly along transportation routes. For example, along the rail lines, there's often tree of heaven. The lanternfly really like that. And then that makes it easier for them to hop on that way. There's also several major warehouses that are shipping out across the country that have had active lanternfly populations around them. Plants, both live and cut plants, including, potted plants, Christmas trees, things like that. We've also seen lanternflies transported that way. I always put firewood separate, even though firewood is, yes, it's a plant material as well, but I include it separately just to emphasize it because it is such a big way that a lot of invasive insects are spread. Then finally, lanternfly will lay their eggs on honestly just about anything. So anything that you're keeping outdoors can potentially end up with lanternfly eggs on them. Now, the biology. Lanternfly in their first through third instar are black with white spots. Sometimes people can confuse them with ticks because they can be pretty small initially, but there are two ways to tell them apart. First, ticks will lie flat on a surface, whereas lanternfly hold themselves kind of up at an angle. The second thing is ticks, when they are disturbed, they will crawl along the surface, whereas lanternfly will hop. They have really powerful legs. They're very good at jumping. Once they reach their fourth instar, they develop this sort of reddish, pinkish color to them, and they still retain some of those white spots and black patches. Then as adults, I like bugs anyway, so I think they're beautiful, but they're really beautiful as adults. People will confuse them with butterflies or moths. They are not. And that's because of these hind wings. They've got this bright red patch to them, this white stripe, this other black area, these black spots, and then their forewings are semi-transparent and they have black spots all over them. Now, if you are looking for lanternfly, you are more likely to see them in this resting picture, the top picture right here, than the bottom picture, which can make them a little bit harder to spot. You usually only see those beautiful hind wings when they're either flying or when they're disturbed, they'll flare them. And when they've been killed with a pesticide, they'll also flare their wings as they're dying. Now, when I do this in person, it's a little bit more of a trickier thing, but in this image, there are between 1 and 5 egg masses, and you can throw your guess in the chat if you want while I'm talking. It's a little easier when it's right on your screen. But I'm showing you this to emphasize how hard the egg masses are to see. And here's the answer. There are 2 egg masses in this picture, right in the center. And as you can see, they really blend into that tree trunk. I probably would not notice it if I was walking by it. It wouldn't even catch my eye. They really look like mud, particularly when they've gotten a little bit weathered. And so it's, again, if it's on, some stone, if it's on a vehicle, you would just think it's mud. You wouldn't even really pay attention to it. So this is one of the hard parts about lanternfly. The adults are very flashy. The egg masses are incredibly cryptic. What I suggest if you're in an area with lanternfly, before you move to a new area, just, check your car or anything else outside. And if you see something that looks like mud, just to be on the safe side, get like a card or something else that's not going to, destroy the surface, scrape it off. If it's not lanternfly eggs, hey, your car's a little bit cleaner. If it is lanternfly eggs, you've prevented them from being spread to a new place. Lanternflies feed on phloem. They have basically like a little straw for a mouth part that they stick right through the bark of the tree. As they get bigger, they tend to switch host plants, because when they're smaller, they can't actually get that little straw through thicker bark. So they go for thinner bark trees when they're younger and then move to thicker bark trees when they're older. This also allows them to shift onto larger trees that have just a bigger volume of phloem in them as they age and require more food. Now, here are the host plants. This is the bad news. This list shows the most common host plants, the things that they will go to first, but there are over 90 other things that they will eat. They will try to eat just about anything. They are not picky at all. They start out on things like roses, grapes, and tree of heaven in the spring. They will then move to black walnut, butternut as the spring progresses, going to river birch, willow, and sumac later in the summer, and then finally switching over to red and silver maple at the end of the summer. They will also feed on oaks in October, November, December. They don't love oak, but it tends to have the sap flowing later in the year, and so if they'll eat anything they can get, and the other trees aren't available for them at that point. 2 things to note here. First, the grape is a really popular food plant for them all through the summer. They absolutely love grape, and this is a big problem, and I'll talk more about the damage in a minute, but they will feed on grape through the whole summer. They will also feed on tree of heaven for the whole summer, which you might think like, hey, tree of heaven's invasive, great, they can, take each other out. Unfortunately, no. There has been some dieback on tree of heaven saplings, but they don't seem to do serious damage to the full-grown tree of heaven. So we don't get help there. Now, the damage. Spotted lanternfly, I want to emphasize here, they were first discovered in the United States in 2014. They didn't really have a huge outbreak and really expand in numbers and start doing damage until around 2018. Did I say 2008? 2014 first introduced, 2018, they had an explosion in population size. So it's only been around, 3 to 4 summers at this point that we've actually been able to study these insects. What that means is we have some good data, we are figuring them out, but all of this is early information. If you are actually dealing with spotted lanternfly yourself, I really recommend going and looking to see what the latest research is, because I gave a talk in January and I have changed it since then because more data has come out that has allowed us to better understand lanternfly. So just keep note of that. So we are starting to see some signs of stress on woody trees that have heavy lanternfly feeding. This can reduce growth. There's also some cases where trees will drop small branches that have been particularly hard hit by lanternfly. They can just damage the tissue that they're inserting their little straw-like mouth parts into. So if you have enough of that on a small branch, that can kill the branch. This is a potential issue because it can make the trees more susceptible to other issues in the long term. For example, if there was a drought, the tree wouldn't be able to handle the drought as well. If a disease came through and the tree has already been hit hard by spotted lanternfly, it might not be able to deal with that as well either. So that's our biggest worry right now with full-grown trees, are those stress issues. And with other invasive species, we have seen that that has been a serious issue, the stress that they cause, even if they don't kill them outright. Now, there are two major types of crops that people often talk about when they're worried about spotted lanternfly. The first is grapes. Spotted lanternfly will outright kill grapes. This is an image that's a pretty typical density of spotted lanternfly on a grapevine. Vineyards in Pennsylvania, where it started, have been devastated. They were able to knock out all of the grapevines in an entire vineyard in a single year. The vineyards that did have their grapes survive, a lot of the grapes they tasted bad. You couldn't use them for anything. Other vineyards have now moved to really heavily increased spraying that has made their expenses increase dramatically. In some cases, it's harder for them to, sell the grapes because of that dramatic increase in spraying they've had to do. So it's really, really a big issue for the vineyards. Most of them are just essentially trying to keep their grapevines alive right now. Now, the other issue that people are concerned about is on fruit trees. The data on fruit trees is really still coming in, and there's some research that shows that small fruit trees in particular, spotted lanternfly can have a decent amount of damage on, a worrying amount of damage. Those tend to be, saplings, so they're still growing, they're really small. If they get heavily hit, that's an issue. Other research shows, particularly larger fruit trees, it's not as much of an issue, it's less to worry about, but we're still figuring it out. What I would say, if you are concerned about fruit trees, I would recommend, keeping an eye on the research that's coming out. Don't panic yet, but watch your tree and start thinking about some of the management options if you get a really heavy infestation of spotted lanternfly in your area. So that's still being sorted out. There are indirect impacts of spotted lanternfly as well. Spotted lanternfly produce something called honeydew. If you have ever had a big infestation of aphids and there's this sticky stuff underneath them, that's honeydew. It is essentially sugary insect pee, and spotted lanternfly are big. They produce a lot of honeydew. It gets all over everything underneath them. If that is a plant, it can cover the plant in honeydew, promote the growth of sooty mold. That can prevent the plant from photosynthesizing properly, and it can make the plant sick. If it's, your deck, your car, anything else like that, it's gross. It's messy, it's gross, it's hard to wash off. It's a big nuisance. Another thing is that stinging insects, they love the honeydew. I actually, in the Indiana site, I watched a yellow jacket and a hornet fighting over a lanternfly to get direct access to that honeydew. So they really, really like it. And this, if it's in if it's in someone's yard or near a business, you don't want a whole bunch of stinging insects flying around all the time. It's just, again, it's a nuisance on top of everything else that they do. So management. Penn State put together this really great chart that can help you decide what type of management you need to do right now. I'm not going to walk through all of the details, but it starts out with, low, that basically goes from low levels of lanternfly all the way up to really high levels of lanternfly on one axis. And then on the other, it shows the, a few favorite host plants, many host plants, if the plants are under stress or if they're near vulnerable plants. So that would be, if you're near something like a vineyard, your decision making is going to be a little bit different than if you're not really near any sort of vulnerable plant. basically what you do is you go, say you have, a few egg masses or nymphs or adults, but you don't have very many plants that they like, well, you're in the low risk category, so you might not have to worry as much. Now, if your plants are under a high amount of stress and you have a lot of spotted lanternfly around, well, that's when you start getting into a higher risk category. So you can use this chart to really think about what you need to be doing right now to deal with the lanternfly. Now, I like this chart in some ways. This is another Penn State one, and I don't like it in other ways. It's basically a chart showing the different types of control that you can do, and starting with the cheapest and the ones with the least environmental impact, going all the way up. You can, of course, use multiple forms of control here. If you're someone who's in the red on this slide, you might need to jump straight to the chemical control. You wouldn't start out with the low level. So I think it's a little bit misleading in that way, but I do like that it shows that you have different options for management. Out in Pennsylvania, they've been seeing a lot of people who really don't need to jump straight into using really intense, heavy pesticides, and that's just not necessary if you're not in a high risk category. So the first one that they have listed are promote plant health. If the plant is healthy, it's less likely to suffer severe impacts. Remove favored host plants. Try some of those mechanical controls like scraping egg masses. There are some biocontrol options they're working on. Particularly, there's a fungus that looks fairly promising that hits lanternfly. And then you can start thinking about chemical controls as well. And again, you can pair different controls here. So the Indiana site. As I said before, it is currently Indiana. It was discovered in 2021 during the summer. Somebody from the public reported it. So, those reports really do matter. It would have been a long time before we found it if this report hadn't come in. It is down in Switzerland County. It's in a wooded area where it's really well established. I've been to it. The females were full of egg masses when I was there. They looked very happy, unfortunately. So they are thriving here in Indiana. I do want to note there could be other sites. This is a place we know about, but they could be in other places, and we'd really like to know if they're in other places. So if you see spotted lanternfly anywhere in Indiana, please send in a report. Even if you're in Switzerland County, that can help us, get an idea of the actual full area that the lanternfly is there. What can you do? Well, if you live near the infestation, you can report it, familiarize yourself with management so you're prepared to take those actions if it becomes an issue for you. Inspect everything before you travel. Anything you keep outdoors could potentially have a lanternfly on it. Just check it over before you leave, check it over when you get there. You can also monitor for preferred host plants, particularly grapes. And if you have Tree of Heaven, it's invasive too. If you've been thinking you should get rid of it, now is the time. It's not going to stop lanternfly, but it should help, slow them down at least. If you don't live near one of the sites, again, report. Wait for updates. The Department of Natural Resources has a newsletter where they'll send out updates. The Purdue Landscape Report will also send out updates. Either of those are great options. We don't send out a ton of emails, just 1 to 2 every month. And then again, remove Tree of Heaven. And if you're not sure how to do that, Emerald Ash Borer University, I'll throw a link in the chat afterwards, is going to have a webinar. Lenny Farley is going to do it. He's going to explain how to properly remove Tree of Heaven so that you're being safe, and also you can actually get rid of it because it is tough to get rid of. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about reporting because I know most of you probably know how to do it. You can use EdMaps. EdMaps is a really great site for it. It has the Great Lakes EDN app is also a really good associated app. All of those reports are reviewed by experts to, see if it is what you think it is or not. You can also call 1-866-663-9684, which is 1-866-NO-EXOTIC, or email the Department of Natural Resources if you have a report. Or, I always say if you totally forget who you're supposed to contact, find someone who works on invasive species, get in touch with us. we will get the information to the right person. When you report it, write down where you are, get a picture. Pictures are super important for us. That's the most important thing. And if you can, collect a sample, but just make sure you're doing it safely. Okay, and with that, here is my contact information as well as a few other resources. And I don't know if I have time, but if I do, I'd be happy to take questions, or you can also email me or I can answer in the chat after.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So people, go ahead. If you've got some questions, throw those in the chat. And we do have a couple already for you, Elizabeth. The first one is, do all life stages of the lanternfly damage trees?
Yes, you know, besides the egg masses, obviously, since they're, you know, not really doing anything to the tree, but yes, the nymphs and the adults damage trees. They're all feeding on the trees. They've all got that little straw for a mouth part, and they're just drinking away all summer long, unfortunately.
Tom was wondering, are there any biological controls known yet for this species?
There are a couple native funguses that seem to impact lanternfly. There's research being done on that. It doesn't look like they'll be able to totally take out all lanternfly, but we might be able to use that in combination with other control measures to at least knock down the population. There's also a lot of research being done on some parasitoids that they're collecting from the native range of the lanternfly to try and see if we can, you know, in the long term introduce those. But for that, they're like I said, this is really early stage research, and they have to go through a really rigorous process to make sure those parasitoids aren't going to attack any of our native species, to make sure that this is, you know, a good environment where they'll be able to thrive, that it's a habitat they'll like. So that's really much more long term.
Michelle wanted to know, is there any native insects that are lookalikes that we should be aware of to compare?
Yeah, there are some moths that also have those really bright patches on their wings. I will share in the chat after I'm done talking. We made an image that shows a lot of the lookalikes. What I would say is, if you see something and you're not sure if it's a lookalike or the lanternfly, just take a picture, send it to us. It's a fine line because I really want those pictures. I really want people keeping an eye out for it, but I love moths. I don't want people going out and killing our native moths because they get mistaken for lanternfly. So if you see something it might be, get that picture, send it to us, and we'll be able to tell you what it is.
And I've got two more questions for you. First one is, where is the lanternfly originally from? And then a second question was, what current pesticides are on the market that affect the lanternfly?
So it's originally from Asia. It was brought over on some imported stone that had some egg masses laid on it. And like I said, the egg masses look like mud, so nobody realized what it was before it was too late, before they hatched out. And actually, it's been really great. We've been working with for the parasitoids, we've been working with some researchers in China who've been really helpful in helping us find where the lanternfly is there, which helps us find the parasitoids, which is, you know, in the long term, hopefully will help knock the population numbers down. For the insecticides, there are a whole bunch that are pretty effective at killing an individual lanternfly. The issue, and you can find a full list on the Penn State website, the issue is that the lanternfly are highly mobile. So you will, you know, use the insecticide, it's great for the short term, and then you got another wave of lanternfly moving in, particularly when they're adults. The data that I saw at a conference on lanternfly recently, you know, you see this, that you're using your insecticides, there's a decrease in the number of nymphs. It looks like, hey, this is working. And then when you hit the adult stage and it spikes again, the number of lanternfly in an area, because they're flying in from the surrounding landscape. So that's really the trick with them. But I can share that Penn State resource in the chat if anyone has a need for it. Hopefully I'll remember everything I said I'll share.
Yeah, you got a bunch.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all the questions that we got on the Lanternfly. There was a question whether we could share your slideshow.
Yeah, I'd be happy to provide that to you. Just send me an email and I'll send it off to you.
Okay, what we'll probably do, folks, is potentially put a link somewhere and let you know where that link is. And that's going to be Stephanie that's in charge of that, I think. Stephanie, she's our person that's in charge. Well, thank you, Elizabeth. That was very informative, and definitely something that all of us are going to be looking for here in Indiana and hopefully not finding for a while. All right, our next speaker is a colleague of mine. I've worked with her a little bit here on some research projects on the Hoosier National Forest. So Lauren Pyle-Knapp, she's a research ecologist with the Forest Service and part of the Northern Research Station located in Columbia, Missouri. Her research focuses on using silvicultural or vegetation management approaches to solve emerging ecological issues to natural resource management, including plant invasions and disturbance. Prior to her current position, she was the 2016 Presidential Management Fellow working as an ecologist on the Sierra National Forest in California. She also detailed with the Northern Research Station in Warren, Pennsylvania, and at our Washington office. She was awarded the USDA Forest Service Deputy Chief's Early Career Scientist Award in 2019. She has a bachelor's in environmental science from the American Military University, a master's of forestry resources from Clemson, and a PhD in forestry resources from Clemson University. So we're glad to have Lauren here, and take it away, Lauren.
Thanks, Cheryl. Can everyone hear me? Okay, good. So I'm actually in transition between Louisiana and heading back to Missouri. So I'm currently in a hotel in Mississippi. I was down visiting a site for maybe a potential research project on Chinese tallow, which is what I did my master's and PhD on. So there seems to be a lot of traffic because I'm right next to the interstate. So if you hear a lot of noise, I apologize. So thanks, Cheryl, for the introduction. It's great to see some familiar names on the participants list. And so I'm going to be talking about controlling an invasive tree with a native fungus. And this is inoculating Ailanthus altissima, also known as tree of heaven, but we can't call it that because Joanne Rebick, the person I've been working with on this project, would shoot me dead if I was to call it tree of heaven, since there's nothing heavenly about it. And we're controlling it with Verticillium non-alfalfa. So let's get started. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the biology and ecology of Ailanthus. So it is native to China. It's dioecious, and so there's separate male and female trees, and that's actually really helpful for controlling it. So Joanne Rebick and others in 2015 did this study where they looked at using like fixed aerial aircraft or helicopters to identify Ailanthus in the dormant season, because the female trees hold on to the seeds pretty well, and you can actually see it from the air. And so the bottom right picture shows in those red circles Ailanthus mother trees. And so what you can do is you can GPS those and go back to them and prioritize them for control. So, you know, the mothers are the ones producing the fruit, and that's a quick way to sort of prioritize the landscape. And it's widely distributed. So even though it's native to China, it's been introduced pretty much globally. It is an invasive tree pretty much everywhere it's been introduced. I certainly saw it out in California, and yeah, it's just everywhere. It was introduced to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1784. So it's actually been in the US for quite a long time. And actually that's one of the reasons why they think that this native fungus has actually been able to come in contact with Ailanthus and now is resulting in mortality of Ailanthus. So it's certainly a prolific seed producer. The greatest production is between 12 and 20 years old, 350,000 seeds per year per tree. So very prolific. It's wind dispersed, and so that of course helps for dispersal to new sites. It has a long viable seed bank. And so some of the work that Joanne did in this figure to the right looks at seed viability through time. The black solid line is buried seed, and then the dotted line is seed that was just placed within the litter. And as you can see, buried seed, the germination percents, even 5 years, are still pretty high. So that really impacts the amount of time you have to manage for this species. So even though you kill the above stems, you still have to go back and make sure you're targeting any reproduction thereafter. It's very shallow rooted, and this shallow rooting helps its ability to be an aggressive root sprouter, so it can send out root sprouts from the roots. It's very clonal in that regard too, and so you can have one tree and it can have many other little trees with it, and they're all connected by the root system. And that's actually important to recognize for the verticillium fungus as well. So it's pretty intolerant of shade, but those root sprouts are actually more tolerant than it is when it's just a regular individual tree. And so basically it can share the resources. So a larger tree can provide more nutrients and stuff for those root sprouts. And so those are able to be more tolerant. Seedling growth is 3 to 6 feet. So if you just have a first year seedling, it can grow 3 to 6 feet. These are pretty much going to be optimum conditions, full growing sunlight. Sprout growth 10 to 13 feet. So if you cut in a tree down, it can really rapidly grow from those sprouts. It can get to be about 90 feet tall and as large as 40 inches in diameter at breast height. And so they can get to be pretty large trees. And it's generally considered short-lived, but that's when you're comparing it to something like an oak. But it's still a pretty long-lived tree. Can be 80 years old in sort of full sunlight conditions, growing as an individual, 60 years old and growing in the forest, but there's been documentation that can be over 120 years old. So it's allelopathic. It has a chemical known as anthone, which allelopathy kind of refers to the release of chemicals that inhibit the germination and growth of other species. It's been documented to affect more than 35 species of hardwoods and 34 species of conifers. So this really has an impact of anything that's growing around an Ailanthus tree is going to be inhibited or their growth reduced because of these chemicals that it produces. And this can actually have long-term impacts on the soil microbial communities as well. It's such a powerful chemical that it's actually been tested as a bioherbicide. When it comes to what Ailanthus loves, it loves disturbance. So timber harvesting, blowdown events, any sort of disturbance to the forest can result in high abundance of Ailanthus if the seeds are in the area, which since it's wind dispersed, they get around pretty easily. It does have a preference for cooler, moisture sites, so it doesn't really prefer rocky, dry ridge tops. It's more going to be in your maple, sort of more music site types. At this point, we've documented that prescribed fire does not facilitate its spread, but it's still kind of unknown about how prescribed fire can help manage the species. So let's go a little bit into the history of Ailanthus wilt, or the verticillium fungus. So in 2002, 2003, unprecedented extensive wilt and mortality was observed in south central Pennsylvania. In 2009, approximately 1,100 trees were observed with wilt symptoms in western Virginia. And then in 2012, symptoms were observed in southern Ohio. And it's important to mention that in each one of these states, the verticillium fungus was identified. So the verticillium non-alfalfa fungus was isolated in all 3 of these instances. What's also important to mention is that you cannot move a fungal pathogen across state lines. And so in each one of these identified sites, you have a research study that has been conducted, and it's all by different scientists. And so really what this does is help mount evidence that verticillium is effective for the management of Ailanthus. But for moving it across states, there's been people that have been like, well, I would like to try it, in Illinois, but because it hasn't been identified there, folks weren't able to do studies there. So what is verticillium non-fluffy? It's a soil-borne plant pathogen. It only attacks plants, not animals, not humans. Produces resting structures that can survive in the soil or within plant debris. Basically, those structures will germinate and form mycelia that penetrate the tree's roots and basically clogs up the tree. The trees die relatively quickly, and it can impact all stages of Ailanthus growth, including seedlings to mature trees, and also roots and root sprouts. So the symptoms include wilting leaves. So in the picture to the right, you can see the droopy Ailanthus leaves, premature defoliation. So you can see a lot of the dieback within that canopy. And then here you can see we've swiped away the bark, and you can see that yellow vascular discoloration. And that's basically the clogging up of the tree with the fungus, and then subsequent mortality. So the Ailanthus Wilt Project in Ohio is where I come in, but it's really spearheaded by Joanne Rebick, who's a retired Forest Service Northern Research Station plant physiologist. And she led the charge to test the efficacy of verticillium within forests in Ohio. And actually Cheryl was a part of some of this initiation of this project. She has since retired, so I've helped out to try to move things forward for her. So this is a distribution and abundance map using FIA data of Ailanthus in the eastern US. The smaller circles indicate less coverage, bigger circles, more coverage of Ailanthus. You can kind of see that it's pretty well distributed in the eastern US, but along our Appalachian mountain ranges, and then also in Kentucky and Tennessee. So Joanne selected 5 sites within Ohio. 3 were state forests. 1 was the Wilds, which is an interesting Jack Hanna Zoo, and then the Marietta unit on the Wayne National Forest. The objectives were to quantify the verticillium fungus to kill Ailanthus, to quantify the disease spread. So if you inoculate one individual, does it spread to others? And then determine if there's any effects on native forest structure and species. So she had 5 forests. At each forest, she had 5 treatment units. She had one water inoculated plot per forest, and then 4 verticillium inoculated plots. Within each one of those inoculated plots, she inoculated 10 randomly selected trees, and then those were monitored in nested vegetation monitoring plots. So it's important to note that, Ailanthus loves disturbed forests. And so these plots and these sites are highly disturbed. And so there's a history of strip mining, oil and gas exploitation at each one of the sites, also logging, and then the reclamation from these strip mining and oil and gas exploitation also is a disturbance in itself, because they really compact the soil and it can limit tree growth in that way. And so because Ailanthus can grow anywhere, Tree Grows of Brooklyn, the book cover is an Ailanthus tree growing out of the sidewalk. They can grow anywhere, but some of these disturbed sites are really impacted for native species. And so that's one reason why they're able to do well. But I'm mentioning this because there's high variability between our sites and between our plots. And so that variability comes into effect a little bit with our results. So for instance, this is a table, no need to go into details here, but we have each one of our sites in the column, and then across the row, we have the different species, overstory species, Ailanthus, maple, elm, ash, cherry, yellow poplar, oak, and hickory, and then other species. And if you were to look at it, you would see a lot of variation between the sites, but also between our control plots and our wilt plots. And if you look at overall, the bottom left-hand highlighted area, we have more Ailanthus in our wilt plots than in our control plots. And that's because we're doing an Ailanthus wilt study. So Joanne specifically targeted the plots that had the higher Ailanthus for determining the effects of verticillium wilt than the ones that had lower. So it kind of gives us a little bit of different starting conditions. But generally, as we look at sort of the size distribution of Ailanthus, compared to some of the studies that have been done in southwestern Pennsylvania or western Virginia, the Ailanthus here in Ohio were a bit larger. So you have trees going from 5 centimeters in diameter all the way up to 45 centimeters in diameter. It's pretty large, but across our plots, the average diameter is about 14 centimeters, which is still a pretty good sized tree. So just to summarize our results, and I'll go into some more of the details to follow, but verticillium does kill Ailanthus. That's great. It also readily spreads to non-inoculated individuals. We did not observe any effect on other species, and we also saw minimal changes in the understory composition, including no increases or secondary invasions from other non-native plants. So really win-wins across the board. So let's go into the details of verticillium killing Ailanthus. And so the blue lines and dots here represent the average across a site of control plot of verticillium plots. The red is the control plots, and then the open circles are the average across all of the treated areas, and then the closed circles are just the average of all of the controls. And so as you see, the blue lines on the left is the density, and on the right is the basal area. The blue lines all start in 2014 higher up, so more dense than our control plots. But as you can see through time, the open black circles are reduced through time. And so verticillium is working to control Ailanthus in these areas. However, from a statistical standpoint, because we're starting in two separate, really far apart between the controls and the treated, and because of just the range of variability, so how much spread you see between those lines, we're not getting treatment effects. But when we think about it ecologically, we're certainly having an impact on the density of Ailanthus through time. And those are the wilt control plot, the wilt treated plots are now lower in density than our control plots. We're also seeing the same thing when it comes to the sapling density of Ailanthus. We're seeing a reduction in the density of saplings in our wilt treated plots, sort of the gray hatch marked boxes versus the control, which is the brown. For seedlings and saplings, or seedling and sprouts, we actually saw no difference through time. They're very transitory from year to year, and fall webworm certainly impacts Ailanthus, seedlings and sprouts, and so we weren't really seeing an effect from the verticillium fungus when it comes to the smallest size class of Ailanthus. So then we wanted to look at, well, what's the probability of dying for an individual Ailanthus? And this is just the trees that were non-inoculated. So the top figure is looking at the size of the tree. So the bigger the tree, what's the effect? And so from our results, we're showing that for a non-inoculated Ailanthus, the larger you are, the more likely you are to survive or to not be affected by the verticillium fungus. In the middle box, we looked at the density. So as an individual, if you are surrounded by more Ailanthus, what's your probability of surviving? And so with the plots that have more Ailanthus, your probability declines. So you're seeing greater mortality in the denser plots. And then we wanted to look at if you had symptomology in 1 year, are you likely to be dead in the next year? And so what we saw is when there was no symptomology prior, you were pretty likely to survive. If you have moderate symptomology, so like some sort of wilting in your leaves, you still had pretty high probability of surviving the next year. But as the severity of your symptomology increased, the more likely you were to be dead the next year. This is to say that also within a year, it's a pretty rapidly impactful disease. And so a lot of times the wilting will show up and it will be dead within the same year. So it's hard to disentangle from that within this. So also we wanted to look at spread. So this figure shows us the different treatment types. So we have our treated inoculated individuals, which are purple, and you can see through time, mortality increases if you're treated and inoculated. Our next is the green spotted line, which is treated and non-inoculated. And so these individuals in 2016 weren't inoculated. So this is natural spread through the stand. And as time progresses, we're seeing more and more mortality, and basically 60% mortality by 2020. That's pretty substantial. And then our water inoculated controlled trees, we did have one tree die from that treatment, but still not very significant. And then our control non-inoculated, you're actually seeing negative mortality because we had ingrowth. We had more Ailanthus through time than we had dying. And then we actually wanted to look at spread within a plot. And so we actually stem mapped each individual tree and trying to see if one tree was inoculated, was it sort of radiating outwards to the nearby trees? We actually discovered that no, there was really no pattern to the spread throughout a plot. And so what's represented here is the inoculated trees are the plus signs, and then you have DBH represented by the circle size, and then the color of the circle represents the year in which it died. So the darker the circle, the more recently it died. What we did find through some spatial statistics is that the trees are highly clumped. And so individuals sort of create little nested clumping features. And that's really important for thinking about verticillium in terms of how you apply it. And so again, as it's clonal, so you can have within a plot different clumps of individual clones. And so that's kind of how we were able to disentangle some of this noise of not being able to look at rate of spread. So we did find no effect on other species. Both of these plots, the one on the left is density, the one on the right is basal area. We saw no effect of treatment across time. We saw no time effect. We really saw very minimal changes in our overstory, which is a really good sign. So we really want to make sure that putting this fungus out here is not going to have an effect on our native species. We also saw the same thing with our saplings and our seedlings and sprouts. No effect of treatment and no effect of treatment. And then we also saw minimal changes in the understory composition. The figure here on the left is looking at light transmitted to the forest floor, and we saw no effect of treatment. There's a lot of variability there. Again, we have some very different sites across our plots, but we didn't see really any significant increases in available light with our treatments. What we're speculating here is that Ailanthus died slowly through time as it moved through the plot. So we're not seeing really rapid upticks in light to the forest floor. And you also get native overstory trees to respond and grow through those openings in the forest canopy. What's great about that is then we have little response from our forest understory. And so we would hope to get maybe more native species response, like our oaks or other species that might be more competitive in the understory. But really, we are excited to see that we didn't have any increase in other non-native species. And so a lot of times we see, you do invasive species management and you get secondary invasions or re-invasions by the same species you managed. And we weren't really seeing that by doing the disturbance of actually managing for Ailanthus. And so verticillium works, but really now what? So there's a lot of non-target testing going on. Striped maple, poison ivy, staghorn sumac, and red elderberry showed some susceptibility, but really not to the effect that Ailanthus has shown. And all this is really mounting evidence for getting EPA registration and approval to produce it as a bioherbicide. So BioProducts, in collaboration with the USDA Agriculture Research Service, is conducting further laboratory tests and greenhouse tests to make sure that there's no non-target effects on other species before it can be released. Sylvan Bio has agreed to be the industrial producer of the bioherbicide. And there's a link here to a great brochure which kind of outlines where things are going. They said that it could take 3 years. Of course, that was like right around the time that COVID happened, and we all know how COVID has affected everything in terms of slowing things down. So I tried to get some information about how that registration process is going, but I haven't heard back yet. But it's still ongoing, and it's definitely an effort that they're trying to pursue, and it takes a lot of funding. And but hopefully we will see this marketed as a bioherbicide. I think in at least one other country in Europe, they have actually started marketing it as a bioherbicide. So what about forest management? So based on our results, verticillium works best on smaller individuals, so trees that are smaller and that are clumped together. So you wouldn't want to use verticillium maybe if you have 1 or 2 trees. You might as well just use herbicide in that effect. But if you have a large populations across a landscape, targeting those that are young and large would be really helpful. And then you just target a few individuals and let it spread naturally. You also want to distribute it across the population to make sure that you're allowing for movement to non-inoculated individuals, especially when thinking about sort of this grouped clump structure due to the clonal nature of Ailanthus. Also, evidence suggests that you should inoculate verticillium in the spring. It's kind of sensitive to temperature, both cold and hot temperatures, but really also thinking about sort of an ecosystem restoration approach. You know, just targeting our invasive species is not really going to maximize the results when it comes to having the species that we want on a landscape. And so in these really disturbed environments, you might not have the seed source available. So reintroducing native competitive species is definitely a way to sort of hedge your bets to promote long-term resilience. We're still learning what is the long-term fate of verticillium. Studies have suggested that it's not really long-term in the soil. And so would you have to go back and retreat if it comes back, if Ailanthus comes back? Or how long might it be there in the root system following overstory death? Also, how do forest operations interact with verticillium after you've controlled Ailanthus? So if you go in, you know, you've got great control over the Ailanthus with verticillium, and you go in and harvest, will you get Ailanthus back because it's still not in the soil? It's not in the soil anymore, but the seeds are. And so these are still things that we are learning. So is verticillium in Indiana. And so Joanne was contacted in 2015 by one of the state foresters in Indiana as a private landowner suspected that verticillium wilt was on his property, resulting in mortality of Ailanthus. They collected some samples and sent it off to the Purdue Diagnostics Lab. And unfortunately, you see the report here, verticillium was not discovered in those samples. So to date, we have not seen verticillium outside of the 3 states identified in the original studies, which is Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Ohio. But it doesn't mean it's not there. And so if you do suspect that you might have verticillium attacking your Ailanthus, send it off to the Purdue Diagnostics Lab, and they'll be able to come back and say if it's verticillium, and certainly contact the state Department of Forestry as well. So there's a long list of acknowledgements. Most of the folks out of the Delaware lab in Ohio really did a lot. Joanne Joliffe actually did a lot of the cultivation of the verticillium inoculum to treat all the trees. And then a long list of folks that have collected field data through time, and funding was provided by the Forest Service, Biological Control of Invasive Plants Program. And if you have any questions or comments to follow up after today, there's my email address. And if you do this science Twitter thing, you can find me on there as well.
Thank you, Lauren. If you have questions, go ahead and type them in the chat. We do have a couple questions that came through already, Lauren. One of them was, since it doesn't attack other species, what do we think the verticillium was living on or attacking before Ailanthus was introduced to the US?
So it probably was attacking other species, but it's not the, it's a more of a co-evolved sort of fungal pathogen. Most diseases don't want to kill its host, but since it didn't evolve with verticillium, it doesn't have sort of the ability to respond to it in the same way. However, I will say that there are a few plots, particularly at the wilds, which have shown to be resistant. So the trees have shown to be somewhat resistant to the verticillium wilt. Somewhat speculate that it might be because it's the iron from some of the exploitative mining that's been going on there. The iron accumulation in the soil and in the stem of the Ailanthus trees might actually help provide that resistance, but that's still an ongoing study. So some trees, particularly large ones, at the wilds in Ohio are resistant to Ailanthus. And if you've ever been to the wilds, it's kind of a weird place. So it's kind of easy to believe that trees there would be kind of weird. I mean, when you drive to these plots, you're driving through like rhinoceroses and giraffes. It's just a weird place.
I've been there. It is interesting. Well, I had a question. So if Sylvan can make a bioherbicide that's using this verticillium, will that then be allowed to cross state boundaries, or will it still be limited to those states that already have it?
Yeah, once it has full EPA registration, it will be allowed to be able to be just like a regular herbicide.
And was there, I remember when I talked to Joanne years ago about it, since it's sensitive to temperature, how are they going to stabilize that bioherbicide so that like when people buy it, if they're storing it and it's still effective, or is that still in research?
I think that's part of it. She mentioned to me a little while ago that it's hard to produce. And so I think those are all going to be questions. Luckily, I don't have to figure them out, but I think those are all questions. It's like, the COVID vaccine, like, will we have to store it in these like temperatures? And yeah, I think that's still stuff to figure out.
I'll keep asking questions if nobody else asks. So do you guys have a idea of where this verticillium started, or how it's moving across these states that we're seeing in? Is it being just picked up, or does it slowly move through the soil, or any ideas?
Yeah, I think the speculation is it exists pretty much everywhere. And they've tried to do some soil testing to see where it is. And there's been it's around and it's native in the communities. It's just, I think having the Ailanthus in the same place as the verticillium is when you're starting to get the wilt. So it might be in Indiana, but it might not be that the Ailanthus are there present with the verticillium when it's alive and reproducing. There's evidence by Luke Flory out of the University of Florida on stiltgrass, looking at sort of these species that have been around in an introduced environment for a long period of time. Our native fungal pathogens or pests are starting to attack these species, and those co-evolved systems are sort of not working themselves out. And so he has a recent paper, I think it's in 2019, looking at the same effects in sort of stiltgrass. It's not verticillium, but it's just, again, two species that haven't interacted and are now interacting because they've been around for so long and they've gotten distributed widely enough that now they're coming in contact with some of these things. I think multiflora rose is another one that they've seen where they're starting to see fungal effects from a native pathogen as well.
Marion had a good question. She said, is it possible, or have you guys tried introducing the verticillium into the soil instead of the trees as a treatment?
I'm not sure about introducing it to the soil. I know there's been recent studies that have just looked at the longevity in the soil, and it doesn't seem to be in the soil for very long. I know Joanne has tested using like you know, you have an inoculated tree, can you clip off part of the stem and then not put that stem into another Ailanthus tree to kind of move it along? And that doesn't work. It seems to be kind of, you know, specific in the sort of environments that it likes and that it will reproduce in.
Gregory was wondering, has this fungus been found in the native range where Ailanthus occurs, so over in Asia?
I do not believe so, but I'm not sure. The Chinese literature is not often in English, so it's sometimes hard to know that information. I know that from working with a lot of different Asian invasive species. And it's probably, you know, it might have a verticillium fungus, but they're co-evolved, so Ailanthus doesn't respond to it in terms of mortality. But
I thought I remembered that Joanne said there were some other species of verticillium that hit Ailanthus, but they weren't as virulent, right? So they didn't have that massive kill pretty quickly.
correct. Yep. There's been lots of different studies looking at different verticillium funguses, and that's also within Europe and in the United States. The non-alfalfa has been found to be the most virulent to control Ailanthus. And that's the one that they're trying to get the EPA registration on. I think you had a question from Vicky. Yes, when you say population, do you mean clone? And when you say individual, what do you really mean? So individual, when I'm referring to that, I'm referring to the individual above ground stem, so the tree or the sprout or the sapling. When I say population, that's usually a group. And so if you look across the landscape, you'll have different populations of those. And so those are sort of, think about a city, I guess, or town, and that would be the population. When I say clone, so that would be, you know, the same genetic material for across individuals. And so we usually refer to them as sprouts within trees, not as ramets. Those are usually more for non-woody species, but yes, it would be sort of a similar idea. Hopefully that answered that question.
I think that's all the questions, unless you saw any other ones, Stephanie, that I missed.
I think you got them all.
Right, well, it looks like we're right on time. Thanks
I'll just
again,
mention,
Lauren, for, oh, go ahead.
We have a manuscript in review with the Journal of Forestry. Hopefully we'll be out shortly, and so we'll be able to share it with you.
Right, thanks, Lauren. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie.
All right, thank you. So, wow, that was great. Thank you to our guest speakers for being able to be with us today. Thanks for everybody who's able to be with us today. I'm really excited to see how many people have tuned in today. So I have a really exciting part in this meeting. Which, by the way, I know we've talked about it through the meeting, but I know people have been coming in and out. So I am Stephanie Shook, and I'm the fairly new executive director for SICIM. I came on board late last year. So I am going to be announcing the 2022 CISMA grant winners today. This grant award was initiated last year, and we hope to continue it each year. The funding for this grant comes from the CISMA conference and conference sponsors and goes towards projects throughout Indiana. Some examples of the projects that have been funded, so last year was our first year, are invasive tree and shrub replacements, boot brush installations, educational signage and workshops, weed wrangles, and tools used for invasive species removal workdays, and more. Those are just a few examples. Information on these grants and application materials can be found on our website under CISMAs and funding. We will open again for proposals for 2023 Geez, did I say 2023? Yeah, so opening for proposals for 2023 in November, early November. And just to let you know, our 2022 CISMA conference is scheduled for August 17th. It will be in person. So the last 2 years we've had it virtual for the conference day. Last year we introduced field event days throughout Indiana. We had 10 last year. We are going to do the same thing this year. So the August 17th is the conference day, and then we will have field days throughout the state. The in-person event is at the Indiana FFA Leadership Center in Trafalgar. And there's more information on our website. If you go to our website and click on CISMA conference, and we will be updating that. So we're still finalizing the details, but all of that information will be on our website as we finalize those details. So now the exciting part. The grant winners for 2022 are, in no particular order, by the way, Tippecanoe Invasive Cooperative Task Force. They're going to purchase invasive species removal equipment for rental and outreach materials. So congratulations, Ticked. Davies Martin CISMA. They're going to be purchasing outreach materials for public events, weed wrangle supplies, and providing boot brushes for the community. So congratulations, Davies Martin CISMA. Which, by the way, we have 8 CISMAs who are receiving funding this year. So that's really exciting. Next one is Hendricks County Invasive Management Cooperative. They are going to be doing a cow repair bounty and replacement and educational workshops on that and outreach materials. The next one is Lawrence County Keep Invasives in Check. They are going to be doing invasive shrub education and outreach, and also doing a replacement program for those invasive shrubs. Next one is Kosciuszko Water and Woodland Invasive Partnership. They are going to be building and maintaining a native plant demonstration garden at a local library. Next is Wayne County Invasive Plant Education and Removal. They are going to be doing a 4-acre restoration with demonstration and education all wrapped into that. So congratulations, Wayne County. Next is Henry County Removes Invasive Species. They are going to be doing a invasive tree and shrub exchange program, and they'll be exchanging for native trees and shrubs, of course. And last but not least, Warwick County Invasive Species Partnership. So they'll be doing burning bush removal and replacement and educational workshops along with that. So congratulations to everyone, all of the CISMAs who are getting funding through our CISMA grants this year. And also look for, so reports are coming in now from the grants that we gave out last year. So look for that type of information, those types of things on our website. Also on Facebook, we'll be sharing all the fun things that everybody did last year. And by the way, if you don't follow us on Facebook, and you are on Facebook, follow us on Facebook. We're also on Instagram. We post lots of fun pictures and really try to help get the information out about what all of our CISMAs are doing throughout the state. So lots happening in 2022. Congratulations, everybody. So I'm just going to wrap up with a few things. I'd like to remind everyone to watch the video updates by the regional specialists if you haven't already. The link was provided in Will's email yesterday, and I think it was put in the chat. We'll make sure we share that in our email after this meeting as well. And you can also, of course, just search for our YouTube page and find them there. Make sure you register your weed wrangles and join some of those in your local area. As I mentioned, save the date for the CISMA conference, August 17th. And Will mentioned our t-shirts. So if you want one of these Ask Me About Invasive Plants t-shirts, order by April 1st, and we'll get those out to you. We will send out an email with a lot of information that we've talked about over the last couple hours. And we'll also have a survey there. I will put a link to our survey here in the chat in just a minute. So please fill that out to help us so that we can keep making these meetings worthwhile and interesting to everyone. So with that, I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank SICIM's board and committee members, staff, and all the hard work that's being done by the CISMAs throughout the state. I want to thank our donors and sponsors for SICIM. And if you want to be a donor or a sponsor, you can go to our webpage and you can do it right there from our website. And I can't wait to see what 2022 brings. So I'm honored to be among such dedicated people. And I'm excited to be here. So that's all I have. Will or Dawn or Cheryl, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, couple quick things. Thanks all for attending, and please stay informed with us. As Stephanie said, follow us Facebook, Instagram, and we welcome anyone that wants to get interested in any of our committees or even our board too. So we're open to that. Reach out.